Hello, I'd like to welcome you to Diana's Makerspace. Well, today I'd like to talk about an interesting topic that has come up every so often. That topic is channeling. I believe sometimes I have channeling of my parents and my grandparents through me, sometimes at different points of the day. Like, for example, sometimes when I do redecoration, I have the spirit of my dad that channels because we used to rent furnished apartments for many years, and my dad was very good decorating. My mother always thought that both of them should have opened an interior design business. After my dad was forced out of engineering by Walker Manufacturing as an executive, um, even though he saved the company from bankruptcy. And also saved the Racine plant from bankruptcy. That's why when I graduated from college, I never wished to work for Case or Walker like that, though. Though. That's also why my dad wanted me to go into pre med rather than engineering as much because he didn't like how he was taking advantage of engineering. But second part of channeling comes with my mother, though. Sometimes with my mother, when I do the thing at 2 in the morning, my mother say, "Well, Henry, that's that's good, but now when Diana last, or sometimes she'll say David, she'll say, well, basically, it's time it's time for her to start do other activities other than computers." And that's when my grandma's spirit comes in, and both my mom and grandma say, well, rather than do computers, why don't you do sewing in the Barbie world as a hobby? And I always had dolls. I had different types of dolls. I had the GI Joe doll. I had the Karate Ken. I had the Barbies, and even like with the GI Joes and the Karate Ken, my grandma would make parachutes, so I'd practice to have them parachute off the top of the porch like that, though, and stuff. But in later years, though, my aunt and uncle, Jane and Bruce, especially my Jane, who thought my baptism was so important, she decided to read a book during my baptism, as my mother relayed to me many years later. Always thought, basically, I wasn't masculine enough or something else, because playing with dolls when I was growing up as a boy. And so what happened was just like with my sister, she first captured my sister and sent her to a strict religious school where my sister's tendencies were sort of hardened to a very hard Christian tendency. And actually, school called us heathens and everything else, even though my father was the deacon of the First Congregational Church of Wauwatosa. My mother was church president, and also my parents were church president of the Presbyterian Church when they lived in Pennsylvania. My dad was the deacon of the Presbyterian Church when they lived in Pennsylvania. So and then the other things what happen. Sometimes I hear like Jane says, "Well, I'm sorry, I didn't mean to do this. I was trying to be Florence Henderson. I just wanted to be the Florence Henderson of Milwaukee and set a good example for the family." While she overdid it. And then I hear when I do my construction stuff, my hobby stuff. It's like I hear this channel through my uncle, which is like because my uncle used to do to get away from some of the stuff that he ran into trying to raise his family, my cousins, and living with Jane was he had a little sort of trailer where he could go fishing and he'd do his fish, and sometimes what he'd do if things got too bad at the house, he'd go in his trailer and no one was allowed in the trailer, so they're going to help him do it, prepare for his fishing and stuff like that though. And when I do my Barbie stuff or my hobby stuff other than computers, it's like my uncle Bruce says, well, that's a way for you to get your released away with I did with the trailer. And even today like that, I still feel like, well, with channeling through my uncle Bruce, he looks and says, well, yes, everything you have you bought by yourself. You never had a co-signer. You never had a co-signer for your car. Never had a co-signer for your house. Even for your apartment or all the computers and other stuff you bought, everything you bought on your own thing. You never had a co-signer for anything. So and many years later when he was alive, we did talk. He said, I wish I would have raised my kids more like you because my kids I allowed Jane to take over and they're raised like brats and they can only live off the trust fund. And so but the other thing is what happens with my grandmother and my mother, they realized too that at one point computers didn't become a hobby for me because basically So when I used to do a lot of coding, what would happen is I'd make code, and at one point, even in the '90s, when my dad was alive, he'd say, "Well, well, it's nice you're doing coding, but what's your next step?" I said, "Well, I'll try to sell." I said, "What happens if you can't sell it?" "Well, I don't know. Maybe I'll put it in public domain." He said, "No, don't do that." He says, "I don't want you coding if you're going to put it in public domain." He says, "Because that's coding to get affection." And one person even gave me a book on something called affection addiction, which I read, and that's true. So when I do the sewing and the Barbie work, it's just for me. It's not to be done. It's not to be put out in public domain. I don't need to get any other affection. It's just I'm glad to get the affection I get from the Barbies and also from a few other people. But basically, I don't feel the need to have to put it out and show it. Sometimes I do put some stuff on GitHub. I do put some stuff on SourceForge, but I do that sparingly now. And also what happens, I'm careful about doing any type of software for sale because in this day I've run into two pirates who stole two pieces of software. So with the channeling from my parents and my aunt, uncle, and my grandparents has helped quite a bit. And namely, what happens with my mother and with my parents and my grandparents, basically getting back into sewing, getting back into my doll play, and also doll making has helped quite a bit. The only thing sometimes when I do my redecoration at night, my mother says, I'll say, well, like, say to my dad, so, well, Diana needs to sleep. It says, she normally takes a nap during the day, so now I said, well, okay, but no, just a little bit, not too much. And that because my dad was very good at decorating furnished apartments, as was my grandparents. People used to love renting our furnished apartments because we had some good decorations, and we did it all with used furniture. We supported St. Vincent de Paul, Salvation Army, Goodwill, and especially St. Vincent de Paul because whenever we wanted to get a stove for apartment, we always would go there first, and they always liked it that we came. They said, "Well, thank you for supporting our mission and supporting the church." And we always did that, and they always were very good like that, though. And the thing is, the thing is, what happens though is like for me with coding, I still do coding. I have my computer set up, but the thing is, I'm not going to do coding where basically I feel like someone says, well, we'll give you $100 if you like this code or something to get out of a pinch. No, that's why I'm glad I still have another hobby other than coding where I go work with the Barbies, do the Barbie world thing, and also make Barbie clothes, Barbie furniture. And this October, I'm going to participate in a program with Toys for Tots to help make doll clothes as part of one local store. And that though, so it's important to have a hobby outside of your field. And for people who are coders or developers, it's important to take that break because coding as a hobby, when you get older, it can also become an addiction because it can build endorphins to do more and more and more and more. And eventually, what happens? I also set a timer of 25 minutes because I do have ADHD. So to stop because sometimes when you do stuff on a time, you lose track of time. It goes, you don't realize, and you look at your watch. Oh boy, 3 hours later, and friends come and say, "Oh, I'm sorry, I didn't realize." And sometimes you get so deep in thought you don't hear the phone. You don't hear the phone calls. So set a timer. I set a timer. You don't want to do my Barbie projects like that though. The thing is, what happens? Channeling is not the same as schizophrenia. Channeling is a very different aspect. It means that basically that your body is sensitive to hearing what past relatives and other things. And this was mentioned in the TV series Charm many times. They show channeling as where you could actually see the spirit essence like that, though. But other people can feel it. I can feel it like that, though. And part of the reason I made this video is because basically to allow people to come out and realize that when you are channeling with your family that's in, that was on Earth but now has moved on, just realize sometimes they're help and sometimes they can only give certain bits of advice or tell you how to do certain things, and that's why, like for example, during COVID, part of the channeling process is I retook up sewing. I also retook up my doll collection and also with my Barbies, and I have two Barbies, one Sandy who's Disney, Mike who's an art doll, Jennifer who's a teddy bear, Doe, who's a ceramic deer, Karen, who is a one third doll, and Pingy, who is a penguin of Fluffy in that though, and also Cookie, who is a cookie man that I received from a friend of mine, Joy, at a Christmas party in 2015. So the thing is basically, it's important to do stuff and do stuff because you want to do it. Don't do stuff because you feel want to get affection, or sometimes it's called dead scrolling. Because many people commit to open source or other stuff. Sometimes they think, well, they do that to get appreciation, but sometimes you get the appreciation, but other times you get the hawks that steal it, and sometimes you don't have the legal funds to fight back to on those that steal it, because then what they do is they do the white glove approach. What that means is, let's say a corporation wants your software, they won't steal directly. They'll hire someone who's sort of disreputable to do a white glove steal from you, and then what happens is basically then they buy the software from them, and if your software, even if your software is code signed, you could have it stolen. And so what happens then when you try to sue the company is, well, we didn't steal from you. We bought it from this person here. This person said it is their software and such and such. You got to sue them first before you can sue us. And then what happens is they'll defend this person indirectly to make it that you can't get to them. So they got like instead of a veil, they got a big wall. And that's why I wish the president would increase intellectual property protection for hobbyists and small vendors and disabled vendors, because we are the ones that get taken advantage of by hawks and by pirates in this area and don't have the resources to fight back. They always say, well, you can call the state attorney general, you could get an attorney. Good luck. Try that in Racine. Racine has 2 patent attorneys, and basically, in the 90s, I tried to contact one, and no luck. In Milwaukee has 5 patent attorneys. I contacted all 5. All 5 were locked into in Milwaukee County Research Park, which is what my lawsuit was against. So I ended up having to go to the West Coast and having another agency resolve it for me. So what I'm trying to say is, that's why sometimes channeling helps, because sometimes you can feel a sense of solution other than in the local environment. And basically, and normally what happens, sometimes it's just a thought like, well, just do this. But it's never anything violent. It's like with me, it's like sometimes like, well, maybe you should try moving this way. Or even like with the Barbies, try making a Barbie house or something else, just as a way of creative expression. And for my dad and my grandparents, the Barbie house is actually channeling through my grandfather, because my grandfather loved to make things, and my dad, and we used to watch a lot of This Old House. So the Barbie house is actually like the channel of my grandpa and my dad participating in This Old House. But since I don't actually have a house, I make a 1/6 house for the Barbies, as the Barbies are part of my family. Like that, some people have pet kids. The Barbies are my family, the Barbie sorority. So instead of kids, the Barbies are adults. They're college age, college educated. So basically, we live as a group. So, but channeling, it has helped me quite a bit like that. Though sometimes it comes late in the middle of the night. That's why sometimes I wake up a little bit early in the morning. But the thing is, doing the Barbie world, doing the Barbie things, it has helped quite a bit in sewing, because basically, it's nice not to always think of coding, because sometimes when I do too much coding, I think about the past, and a friend of mine says, well, please don't live in the past, please don't go back there. But sometimes if I do too much, I think about some bad things that happened. That's why I like the sewing the Barbie, because so far I haven't had any bad thing happen with that so far, and that's a nice thing. And I always remember good times like that, because playing with my dolls in the 70s and 60s, and even slightly up to the 80s. But one thing I would recommend in closing, though, when I went to pre-med, I was in a pre-med program with Anna Marie, and we had a great reputation. All her pre-med graduates up to that time went to medical school. Now basically it's not a perfect record, but part of the reason why it's not a perfect record is because when I went in pre-med and other people went in pre-med, there's some of us that were LGBT, not by choice, but by genetics. I'm intersexed, as were some others. Well, at that time in the military, you have to remember if you were anything other than the gender that you were born in and performed in the gender that you were born in, you could be drummed out, you could be sectioned eight, you could be denied a lot of other things and have your reputation and personal record destroyed. So, um, in Anna Marie's program, I didn't realize at the time, and many people didn't, was military based. It was basically the reason why all the students who graduated Parkside went to at that time went to medical schools because all of them signed up through the LOTC program to become officers and go to medical school as officers. But the problem is, if you're LGBTQ plus, and at that time in the 80s, and even sometimes today, um, or in a community that doesn't support that, it can be very hard, especially if it's military based or church based. So that's why I'm glad the federal government did step in and made Parkside put, UW Parkside put, 70% of the graduates find a job in this field. 60% go on to graduate school or something like that, though, and for each field, so you know, within 6 months, and also with the guarantee that basically, if you did get a student loan, you get special redress if you don't find a job in your position. Don't go to graduate school in 6 months, because also there's a thing about reputation harming that Parks I used to do. And that's what I ran into as well with some people. Because many years later, Anne Marie said, "Well, I guess I can tell you what I did because you can't sue me now." And that because she said the statute of limitations was over, and I talked with the Air Force about, and they resolved it. But the thing is, you got to realize that basically, whenever you deal with small town or small or Midwest or small university thinking, you got to watch it. And even big university thinking, you got to realize, well, are you really dealing with the university, or are you really dealing with a church school, or are you dealing with a military school? Some military schools are very good. University of Phoenix, I highly recommend, because they're LGBT, but they're also part military, but they're open-minded military. So there are many people who went to University of Phoenix who are LGBTQ, and there are many that were in the military that are LGBTQ, and we all got along together fine. We talk, we meet, and other things. But at UW Madison and UW, unless you're willing to get political, and LGBTQ won't support you. And I don't believe in getting political and going to protest and getting violent or everything. I'm a pacifist, so I'll support things by saying I'll say you have my support, or I'll write a letter. But the thing is, again, I'm completely nonviolent. If anyone does violence or threatens violence, I'm out. I'm out. I'm out. So the thing is, the other thing is also when people try to apply medical terms as psychology, saying, well, if people channel as schizophrenic, they're not schizophrenic, or if people on ADHD, there are many people on the spectrum. I've met a lot of people, and yesterday I'm glad to see we've seen there are more trans people that are willing to come out and also able to work, because that's the greatest thing, is to be able to work like that, though. But there also I met many people that are on the spectrum too, and the thing is, being on the spectrum, many people don't understand, because they have these backward beliefs, these dated beliefs, and it's like basically, if you really don't want to understand it, don't go by dated beliefs. Sometimes you'll say, "Well, I'll ask my minister." No, the minister doesn't know anything. The minister doesn't know everything. The rabbi doesn't know everything. The thing to do is, if you really want to know about it, seek qualified current information. What I mean by that, I don't mean someone who's in the 80s or something else. I mean someone who's about my age, or basically in their 50s, sort of, who has experience, but who isn't dated by backwards information, didn't go to school and this backwards information was taught. So no, YouTube is a good source. Some other places are a good source. Excuse me. Also university libraries. But in university libraries, you got to be careful, because sometimes university libraries, you look for something like on the spectrum, ADHD or transgenderism, and you'll find books written in the 70s, like 1973, the Transsexual Empire, which has been recently rediscovered, which is part of the let's see, radical uh, radical feminists against transgender, or something like that. Transgender radical feminists, or something like that. And that's based on the book, the Transsexual Empire in 1973, which was meant to shock people that if transgender was allowed to be too much, it would cause society to collapse and everything else. And it was a shock book. It wasn't really a factual story. And so when you go to libraries, you got to make sure, if you read books like from the 70s, you got to understand that back then they were still trying to suppress it, and that was in the age of DSM-1, where if you were gay, if you were LGBTQ plus, you could have been committed to a mental hospital and other stuff. It's not a mental illness. Gender dysphoria is not a mental illness neither, and being LGBT, lesbian, gay is not a mental illness, nor is being bi. But the thing is, there are a lot of people who have more media access than others that say all these dated things, and you got to think for yourself, because before you make a judgment, why don't you have a cup of coffee with someone who's transgender? Have a cup of coffee with someone who's autistic. Have a cup of coffee with someone who's gay. A cup of coffee with someone who's lesbian. Have a cup of coffee with someone who's bi. Have a cup of coffee with someone who's questioning or plus. Um, talk with them. There's nothing like having a cup of coffee. Go to Wendy's, go to McDonald's, go to Barnes and Noble, Starbucks, wherever. Just have. And what happens if you feel uncomfortable, then during the cup of coffee you can always excuse yourself. And but when you do have a cup of coffee, you're going to find something very interesting. When you actually do get a chance to talk, you don't talk talking points that other people have taught you to talk. You talk your own thoughts. You're gonna find out that you have a lot to share, and the person there is not some sort of weirdo or funny person or strange person. You're gonna find out they're a lot like you. It's just basically how they wish to express their relationships are different than what you are. And the difference doesn't mean it's not threatening. It just means that basically they have a different way of practicing their relationships. And you'll find it just like yourself. They're not trying to push their relationship practice on you, and like you're not trying to push your relationship practice on others. And more people should do that, because basically right now people make a decision based on what they hear from other people that have a lot of media access, and it's wrong, and a lot of the information is wrong. That's why I don't watch local news as much. That's why I watch limited news, and a lot of times I have friends call and say, "Well, did you see this on?" I say, "Well, I'll watch it. I'll watch it now." Because what happens, I used to be a news hound, but um, when when the uh, um, when the Tale of Two Cities American Style occurred during the 2020 election, that's when I tuned out in that though. So, well, these are my thoughts on channeling and some other matters. So let me know what you think. As always, the best way to reach me is on YouTube, Facebook, X, Blue Sky, and Pinterest. And this has been Diana's Makerspace, second edition for September 21st, 2025. Excuse me.